Hello, ladies of Block 2, A225. Competence and Crisis, 1840 to 1880, edited by Don Loftus. Page 22. The Age of the Quippies and the Great Exhibition of 1851. After Chartism, a new kind of liberal politics emerged that combined patriotism, respect for British institutions, and popular constitutionalism. It provided the foundation for a renewed confidence in progress and industry. It presented the British people as rational and reasonable. They knew when to insist and when to restrain themselves in the national interest for working people. This included the right to earn a living. After Chartism, the argument that this right was best served through global free trade gained currency, an argument that had been popularised by the Anti-Corn Law League, Paris 2006. In this way, character, patriotism, and constitutionalism become strongly associated with global trade, industry, and empire. Events such as the Great Exhibition were essential in creating this new vision of the United Kingdom as a preeminent nation among nations and the workshop of the world. The Great Exhibition. The Great Exhibition of the Works of Industrial of all Nations opened on the 1st of May 1851. The exhibition was huge. It contained 100,000 exhibits, half of which were from around the British Isle and the Empire. The other half from the rest of the world. They were housed in the Crystal Palace, designed by Joseph Paxton, 1803 to 1865. A temporary structure of steel and glass that covered almost 950,000 cubic metres in a 7.7 hectare enclosed area of Hyde Park in London. The building was immediately seized as a symbol of all that the Great Exhibition helped to achieve. It was built by skilled workmen, directed by engineers, with material produced by British industrialists, using the latest technology in glass and steel, but designed to work with the natural environment. The glass allowed natural light in. It was easy to ventilate and could accommodate trees and plants. The structure drew on recent advances in science and incorporated the latest inventions designed to increase personal comfort. Flushing toilets, water fountains, and refreshment stands were incorporated into the building. Additions that were intended to make a day at the exhibition enlightening and enjoyable. The original idea for the exhibition come from the Royal Society of Arts, which wanted to educate the public in industry and design. It was organised by Henry Cole, 1808-1882, a civil servant who had worked with Rowland Hill, 1795 to 1879. In designing the postal service and Prince Albert, 1819 to 1861. The husband of Queen Victoria, 1819 to 1901, reigned 1837 to 1901, who helped raise the money for the exhibition through charity events, voluntary contributions, and subscriptions. The overarching aim of the exhibition was to demonstrate that a harmony between nature, industry, and the arts was possible through manufacturing, and that peaceful relations between class and nations could be achieved through trade and commerce. It also aimed to show that great things could be achieved by individual effort and initiative, and from people working together rather than through an act of parliament. Plans for the Great Exhibition initially emerged out of the concerns about the quality of British manufactured goods and a desire to compare them with those from other countries, particularly those from Germany, France, and USA, which were seen as a newly industrialising countries and potential competitors. By the time the exhibition opened, it was a celebration of progress in science, art, and manufacturing, and a demonstration of what could be achieved by cooperation between people, nations, and classes. It is no surprise then that it has been interpreted by many historians as a turning point in history. As a break with the Hungry Forties and the radical politics of Chartism, and as evidence of a new optimism about industry and progress. Pure Brick 2001. However, the Great Exhibition should also be examined as an event that was intended to produce this optimism. It aimed to persuade people that the benefits of industry would open to all and that Britain would lead the world into a new era of peace and prosperity through manufacturing and trade. Historians need to go beyond the survey's presentation of the events to the public to explore the private interest of the organisers and to distinguish the vision of society. The organisers wanted to present from the thoughts and feelings of ordinary people. The Great Exhibition organisers were conscious of making history and keep careful records of their plans. The Royal Society of Arts built an archive of notes and letters relating to the event, and the first historical accounts were produced at the same time as the exhibition itself. Henry Cole's official descriptive and illustrated catalogue of the industry of all nations, 1851, included a detailed history of the event, and fundraising speeches made much of the historical significance of the exhibition before it had even taken place. Turning to 8.4, Prince Albert, Mansion House Speech, 1849, located at the end of the unit. This is an extract from a speech given by the Prince at Mansion House, London, on the 21st of March, 1849. After he had read this, answering the following questions in brief. How does Prince Albert describe what does he see as a leading to the unity of mankind? Prince Albert knows that the present era is a period of most wonderful transition, heading towards unity of mankind. The Prince sees the division of labour and exchange of knowledge as leading to the unity of mankind. He refers to the division of labour as the moving power of civilization, and he urges that it is being applied to science, industry, and art rather than knowing and doing everything. Men acquire specialist knowledge in small areas, which then exchange and shared to the benefit of all or the community at large. You may have noticed something odd about Prince Albert's speech. It is not always what he's talking about. He starts off talking about knowledge and science and ends up referring to products, production, competition, and capital. This was not an accident. Albert's speech and the Great Exhibition itself were intent on exploring the relationship between industry, science, and art and commerce. Cole and his circle at the Royal Society, who organised the exhibition, were utilitarians, interested in what kinds of relationship and things created the greatest happiness for the greatest number. You can see the influence of their ideas in the Albert speech. The greatest happiness, according to the Prince, is produced by the division of labour. For many contemporaries and historians, the division of labour defined industrialisation. It aimed for efficiency by breaking production down into distinct parts, each performed by an individual. There were many critics of the division of labour. Adam Smith, 1723 to 1790, whom you recall from Block 1, who concerned it made work boring and repetitive, while Marx argued that it de-skilled labour, produced wages and alienated workers for the products they were producing. However, there were many political economists who admired and idolised the division of labour because it depended on the cooperation of a number of individuals to make it work. Prince Albert's speech takes this view further. When applied to science, art, and commerce, he imagines the division of labour uniting communities and nations, each playing a part in building a better world. Competition drives the process forward, encouraging the development of ideas and products that are produced in exchange. This process of competition and exchange finds a balance between nature and industry and a balance between science and religion without outside intervention, and it also reveals what or who is superior. As you might have guessed, after the Great Exhibition, it was generally assumed by many in Britain that Britain was the largest power in the world. Parry, 2006. The patriotic view of Britain progress fueled greater optimism about the future. Nevertheless, there are notable critics of this vision, including the Christian socialist and the writer Matthew Arnold, 1822 to 1888, who feared that society would become materialistic and Philistine, Parry 2006. There's also critics from within the liberal movement. The liberal philosopher John Stuart Mill, 1806 to 1873, was concerned that a kind of individualism promoted by utilitarians who was making society narrow, mean and selfish, instead of helping to soften competitive individualism. The religion was making people intolerant, and those in authority was becoming snotty and bigoted. Mill, 1869 to 1859. Mill wanted the divine and individualism that was more humane and altruistic, one based on open communication and a genuine understanding of each other's interests. In a famous essay of 1859 on liberty, he argued that individuals were free to pursue their own interests as long as the pursuit of them did not intrude on the freedom of others. He argued that debate and decision would help people settle their differences amicably and find solutions that benefited the great number. Mill's ideas were very persuasive and much discussed, according to Stefan Coligny. This is because he was saying what many people at the time were thinking. Mill's ideas chimed with those of radicals and liberals who viewed the United Kingdom as a progressive, patriotic, and pluralistic society founded on an ethical union of people and regions. Parry 2006, nevertheless. As you work through Block 2, you'll see that this principle was difficult to put into practice and under constant strain. For example, Unit 11 explores fierce debates about religious toleration and the rights of Irish and British Catholics, many of whom were still considered a threat to the British state. As you learn in the discussion of the parliamentary reform in Unit 4, there were debates about who had the ability to exercise freedom. Women, the poor, and the masses were considered too feeble or ignorant to act in their own interests. Similarly, as Unit 15 on Empire explains, imperial subjects were seen as not advanced enough to be given political liberty, while British writers justified the empire in terms of liberty and free trade. Imperial governance was authoritarian and repressive, given the perceived and actual threats to imperial rule from colonized peoples. Visiting the Great Exhibition. Regardless of these alternative views and debates about liberalism, the exhibition appeared to capture a more optimistic public mood. The opening was a spectacular event captured in a commemorative planted painting by Henry Courtney Seeless that you can see in figure 8.4. Much of the optimism resulted from the event of 1848. The fact that London could host an event in which Queen Victoria could mingle with the masses 3 years after the revolutionary time was seen as a national triumph, prompting an outpouring of patriots, as Macaulay wrote on the opening day of the Great Exhibition. There is as much chance of a revolution in England as the falling of the moon. The Great Exhibition was immensely popular, with a broad range of people. Over 6 million visits were made in the 6 months it was open. These include the great and good of Victorian society, as aristocrats and politicians from across the political spectrum, as well as Victorian notables and celebrities such as the writers Charles Dickens, 1812 and 1870, and Charlotte Bronte, 1816 to 1855. Many members of the middle and working classes visited, taking advantage of the shilling 5p days, Monday to Thursday, introduced from the 26th of May, depicted in figure 8.5. Visitors travelled from around the United Kingdom, Europe, and further afield, and much was made of those arriving on the latest contrivances of the industrial age, and the steamship and the railway. Many railway companies organised excursions and day trips, promoting affordable travel to the working classes. The press made much of the good natured crowd and appeared to take pleasure in a new phenomenon, the mixing of a diverse group of people in a public space. That the event took place without serious unrest of extensive crime was considered a great success. The opening of the Great Exhibition was covered extensively in newspaper reports. You find two such descriptions next to the readings located at the back of the unit, reading 8.5. The Times report on the opening of the Great Exhibition, 2nd of May 1851, is from a well-established daily British newspaper, reading 8.6, Scientific American Report. On the opening of the Great Exhibition, 24th of May 1815, is from a weekly newspaper interested in inventions, manufacturing and enterprise, and one of the many foreign newspapers has sent to reporters a great exhibition. After you have read these extracts, answer the following questions. Who, according to these descriptions, is at the opening of the great exhibition? What do you notice about the way the crowds are described? Specimen readings 8.5 and 8.6 suggest that almost everyone is at the great exhibition, from the royal family to working men and their families and foreign visitors. The reporter or Scientific American suggests that people have come from near and far, the latter probably on railways and steamships. The reports emphasise words such as mass and multitude, which could give the impression of a disorderly mob. However, they also describe with some surprise that the crowds are happy, playful and peaceful. 3 years after 1848, words such as mass and multitude would still have been associated with riot, revolution and disorder. However, the crowds of working people at a great exhibition are quite different. Reports are keen to emphasise that these working class people are eager to participate in the celebrations. The sentence in Read 8.5 is particularly telling. Those honest English workmen in their found for stained jackets and glazed caps felt they had a right to take part in the honours of the day, and to have an honest pride in the result of their own and their brethren labourers. And they walked contentedly and happily, amid prancing horses and gaudily liveries. This report shows that the working class people present are not cowed or defensive, nor are they disgruntled or disaffected. As you may have noticed, the working class are included in the crowd because of their status as labourers and not despite it. According to the reporter, they feel they have a right to be there, and they are rightly proud of labour that have made the exhibition possible. Work at the Great Exhibition. In the mid-19th century, work became idolised as the source of all progress. The Victorian gospel work, as it became known, presented work as noble and liberating. Producing men, it was often male artisans who were associated with this idea, despite the fact that many women worked of great character in helping to build a prosperous society. As Ford Madox Brown, 1821 to 1893, famous painting called Work, figure 8.3, attempted to demonstrate society could function only when everybody did their bit. From the natives laying water pipes to the aristocrats and intellectuals providing leadership, his painting included notable figures who celebrated work such as the thinker and writer Thomas Carlyle, 1951 to 1881, who argued that the labour was noble and that the man perfects himself by working. Carlyle, 1870, page 244. It is also included that those who represented workers, such as the founder and the leader of the Christian Socialist movement, Frederick Morris, 1805-1872. The need to work was accepted as a universal condition that applied to everyone throughout history. This idea was the theme of a famous book, Self-Help, 1859, by the writer and reformer Samuel Smiles, 1812-1904. It argued that even those born into luxury had a duty to work for the benefit of mankind. Work was celebrated in the mid-century as a shared practice that built society and the connections informed between capital and labour. landed aristocracy and farm worker, mistress and servant, wage working in particular, was considered to be the foundation of character. Individual liberty and national prosperity. The Great Exhibition was one of many mid century attempts to celebrate this ideal work. According to Henry Mayhew, it was the first public national expression ever made in this country. As to the dignity and artistic quality of labour, Mayhew 1851. It should improve the self respect and status of workers and inspire them to a sense of their own position in the state. In fact, he argued, the Great Exhibition is a higher boon to labour than the general advance of wages. This vision of work as noble and improving was in sharp contrast to other images of work and workers. Carlyle and Mayhew critic political and economy for imagining work as a cash nexus, a strictly economic phenomenon based on competition between workers for work, which in turn drove down wages. Instead, in the gospel of work, work was well organised by the enlightened employers in modern factories or undertaken by educated artisans in workshops. It was morally and spiritually improving as well as economically profitable. As you'll see later in Block 2, tensions between these different ideas about work and society shaped responses to the Irish famine and to the new poor law and inspired and revived campaign for the vote in the 1860s. These tensions were also exposed during the Great Exhibition. It is taken from the sta- satirical magazine Punch. A characterisation of Mr. Punch is present in the cartoon to expose the hypocrisy of Victorian society. In this case, he reveals a very different image of work from on display of the Great Exhibition. What do you notice about the way work is represented in this cartoon? In the cartoon, work is not mechanised. It is still being predominantly done by hand. Work is not artistic or improving. Workers are haggard and drawn and clearly starving. As the image of the labour, age 75 shows, people are still having to work to earn a living when old and infirm. This cartoon changed the gospel of work. It would have chimed with audiences still familiar with the debates about the plight of the poor that you encountered at the start of the unit. Despite industrialisation, a lot of work was still performed by hand in the mid 19th century, and the mechanisation increased the need for new kinds of skilled labour. Samuel's 1967. There were many handcraft and artisan trades that were esteemed and well paid, such as engineering and machine making. Workers in these trades managed to protect their work and wages by using apprenticeships and trade unions to limit entry. In other cases, however, artisanal workers were subject to competition from factories. You may remember the handloom weavers in Unit 3. Workers in the shoe trade, for example, such as the distressed shoemaker in a cartoon in Figure 8.7, also had to compete with the new mechanised types of production in factories, which could produce more articles for sale quickly and cheaply. Wages in other trades were threatened by sweated workers in an overcrowded labour market. In the textiles and garment trades, like tailors and seamstresses had to compete for work with lots of workers. It was easy to blame migrant workers for cheapening labour. As you'll see in Unit 9, migrant workers fleeing the famine in Ireland in 1840s were blamed for driving down wages and prices in the industrial district of England. Similarly, in East End of London, Jewish migrants from Eastern Europe and were the targets for complaints about low pay and poor working conditions. A number of exposés on the sweated labour were produced in the mid 19th century. One of these, Cheap Clothes and Nasty, by the Christian socialist Charles Kingsley, 1899-1875, first published by the Morning Chronicle in 1850 under the pseudonym Parson Lot, argued that the merchants and the middlemen were exploiting this overcrowded labour market to make quick profit. Kingsley, 1850, however. Kingsley also blamed consumers, including aristocrats, clergymen, and government contractors for demanding cheaper prices in the first place. His investigation showed that sweated workers were found in slop shops making uniforms from the Navy and the clothes for West End shops. He berated the hypocrites who campaigned against slavery in the Caribbean, but who bought clothes made by white slaves at home, and argued that ignorance was no excuse. And he said, men ought to know the conditions of those by whose labour they live, Kingsley 1850. He also argued that the knowledge of working conditions was a matter of self-interest. In a sensationalist account, Kingsley argued that disease such as typhoid and smallpox were being passed from the poor, sweated labour to the aristocrat and clergymen through clothes. The Rev D finds himself suddenly unrepresentable from the cutaneous disease, little dreaming that the shivering, dirty being who made his coat has been sitting with his arms in the sleeves.